The title of the sermon is Roots and Wings. Roots and Wings. Now, those who pay attention to some of these things say, Dave, you talk about this from time to time. You probably through the years have given 3 or 4 sermons through the years talking about roots and wings. And those of you who remember, you're correct. I refer to this concept quite a bit. But as I was praying about it, preparing, I again wanted to cover this subject today. I have on the handout here, how can parents influence their children to find security? Because a lot of the concept of roots and wings has a lot to do with child rearing and how you help children. And of course, as you know, because of my emphasis is if we view God as a perfect father, some of those same concepts of how we can help our children can also be good at helping us. And so again, as I talk about this, you'll say, oh yeah, I've heard you talk about this before. But how can parents influence their children to find security? What do children need? What does a child need? Well, they need dependable people around them. They need dependable people. You hope that's the parents. But again, all parents make mistakes, and if you've now grown up and you realize your parents made mistakes, you don't hold it against them as much as you try to find out who are the dependable people in my life that helped to shape me. And hopefully you'll think back on them, and maybe you'll have a chance to talk to those individuals and show appreciation. Maybe you showed appreciation to them all through your life, or maybe you didn't. And maybe you want to show some appreciation to people who've been dependable for you. Then there are some dependable systems. Dependable systems. A family could be a dependable system. It can be. It's not guaranteed to be, though, because some of you can think about some of your family setups and it wasn't very dependable, and the system was very dysfunctional and didn't turn out to be good. Some people have dependable foster family, whether it's official foster homes or whether it's people who stood up for you and were there for you when you needed them. Not only the individual, but the system. A church can be a dependable system, and even though I would say churches have their flaws, you do find out when you're dealing with children whose families go to churches, I'm talking about any church, usually do better than those who don't go to church. And I realize the problems of self-righteousness. I do realize the problems of all the organizational and idolatry. I get all that. But the point is, in churches, a lot of times you have people who are trying harder, and maybe their kids' classes are more value-based. Maybe their teen classes are more value-based. You can certainly do it without churches, for sure, and you certainly can do it without a bad church environment. But churches can be a dependable system. School can be a dependable system with flaws, with challenges, but certainly you try to find the good in a school. Music and sports programs, etc., these can all be dependable systems that help our kids to find security, that help them to find a good set of life. Through this life, you want your children to find acceptance, and you want your children to find appropriate consequences. So you realize your children have to find a certain amount of acceptance, that you will love them even when they make mistakes, that you'll be there for them when they make mistakes, but they also have to learn about appropriate consequences. And that can be done, again, through systems of school, through music, through sports, through different relationships, and it can certainly be done by different people. So again, we're talking about this, how to help children. And you know me well enough, you've known me for over 20 years, that thereby some of those same principles can help us in how to have a relationship with God. So because the Bible supports the concepts of helping children to have roots and wings. Let's turn over to Matthew chapter 5, verses 24 through 27. You try to have your children have roots. You try to have them to have something they can depend upon. And so certainly that's important for us as well. And I could ask you, what do you depend upon? As you've analyzed yourself during the days of unleavened bread, did you remind yourself of the good things you can depend upon? Did you possibly find some things that you wish you hadn't depended upon so much? Did you find some more superior things to depend upon? Jesus said in Matthew 5, verses 24 through 27, Because here it talks about, it's beautiful. No, that's not what I want there. That's not the one I want. Is it? It must be, sorry about that. It's Matthew chapter 7, verses 24 through 27. Many different words. Even though good words were in the other chapter, these words are, therefore whoever hears these sayings of mine and does them, I will liken him to a wise man who built his house on the rock. Now, we can get into an understanding about what's important to God and what's important to Christ. And that's very important. But I'll even say this. If people build on rock, even if it's not exact spiritual truth, the more people that build their life on fact and strength and good principles and good values, the better their life will be. You see what I'm saying? It's better if we have the absolute truth of God. That's the best. But I'll tell you what, if you have people who base their life on good principles that are not even exactly doctrinally correct. In other words, if people will worship God, maybe they're still violating some of the scriptures, and they need to learn that someday because they maybe don't understand that. The fact if people are committed to a plan and they're consistent with that plan, that's better for a child. So someone can say, well, Dave, I kind of get what you're saying there. So if you have friends who aren't a part of the church of God, but they're committed to rock solid values, you view that as a good thing, don't you? And my answer is absolutely I do. So someone could say, so Dave, you don't even argue with them about the differences of doctrine, do you? Well, unless that discussion is going to produce some good, why talk about that? If you see something they're doing that's rock solid and valuable and beneficial, I'm happy they're doing that. And hopefully they would say the same to me, even the people who don't like some of my doctrines. Hopefully my friends, my neighbors would say, but he's committed to a way of life. He's committed to a way of life that includes God. He's committed to a way of life that serves people. And I'd like to someday talk to him about some of his feast days or whatever, because I don't think those are necessary, they might say. But at least they would hopefully admire and say, but he's committed to that. And we all need to be committed to that, to those good things. And if the rain descends, the floods came, the wind blew, and beat down that house, and it did not fall, for it was founded on the rock. Now everyone who hears these words of mine and does not do them will be like a foolish man who built the house on sand. And the rain descended, the floods came, and the wind blew and beat down their house, and it fell, and the fall was great. So I just ask you, friends, not only how you're helping others, but you right now, you personally, on what do you build your house? On what do you build your life? Cotton candy or something that's strong? Do you build your life on rumors? On negative reports? False accusations? Accusations at all? On what do you base your life? Where are your roots? Let's go back to Joshua chapter 1, verses 6 and 7. Here we're talking about building on the foundation of Christ. And that is very important, to build on the foundation of Christ. But I'll tell you what, you want to be a person who stands for something. Because if you stand for something, even if it's not the perfect stand, if you stand for something, that can help you not fall for everything that comes by. Now, I know there are some stands that are really bad to take, but I hope you have a person who takes a stand. I hope you're not blown around with every wind of doctrine. I hope you're not blown around with every wind of emotion. I hope you're not blown around by every wind of theory. See, in Joshua chapter 1, verses 6 and 7, again, he's talking here about having confidence in the Lord, but it says, be strong and of good courage. And I'll tell you this, are you helping your children to be strong and have courage? I hope you do that. And again, many of us are grandparents. I hope you're gearing our grandchildren to be strong and have courage. Because I'm saying not only do we deal that with our children and grandchildren, I'm asking you as your friend, are you willing to stand and be strong? Are you willing to be strong and have courage to stand for something? Friends, where are your roots? Sometimes we can get stubborn in the wrong roots. I get it. But I would rather see someone a little stubborn in the wrong roots, because God can work with you, and even sometimes your friends can work with you, or you can allow them, you can involve them in your life, and you can use that conviction to get redirected in a better way. But friends, I'm saying roots are important. I'm asking you to analyze, where are your roots? Our roots are probably going to be very similar, but our roots are not going to be exactly the same because our experiences are different. I want to turn to 2 Timothy chapter 4, verses 14 through 16. This seems like an odd scripture, but this comes up to me regularly, so I mention it regularly, and a lot of times I go through it pretty fast. And I hope I can just take just a little time on this. 2 Timothy chapter 4, verses 14 through 16. I was talking to someone the other day who's dealing with a lot of emotional abuse from an individual they know. You say, who's that? Well, it could be anybody. How many people can we put on our hands? How many people can we list who are dealing with emotional abuse? People who try to push you around. And the reason I want to bring this up is, who talked a lot about grace the last 2 weeks? Well, I did for sure. I wasn't the only one. But I talked a lot about grace and forgiveness. And so sometimes people think, because you partake of the Passover, you take of the symbols, and you have to be forgiving, that means if someone comes up to you, whether they do it in a religious fashion or whether they do it in a relationship fashion, they almost have to tell you, you've got to treat me this way or you are not forgiving me. I wish I had $1 for everybody who does that. And I mention from time to time, I don't like to be guilted into anything. I don't like to be manipulated in anything. And if someone comes up to me and says, Dave, you read a lot of scriptures, and no one's done this recently. I'm just saying I wouldn't like it if someone did it. If someone said, Dave, you have to forgive this person. You have to treat them a certain way because you've been talking a lot about forgiveness and mercy. I love forgiveness and mercy. But there are situations where you don't have to do things the way people want you to do them. I've used the example before. It's really a sad example. It's an example where this lady came to me. She said, my father sexually abused me when I was a child, and now I've got this little girl, his granddaughter, and he wants me to let her stay with him overnight. And I say no. And he says, well, you haven't forgiven me. See, that works on people. You have to be a person of grace and you have to forgive me. And I looked at her and I said, do not let your child stay there with him alone at night. No matter what scripture he points at you, no matter how much he talks about grace, no matter how he tries to manipulate you or convince you, do not let your daughter be in that situation. And that's what he's talking about here. 2 Timothy 4. Alexander the coppersmith did me much harm. May the Lord repay him according to his works. I'm a person of grace and you're a person of grace. And as people of grace, you have to recognize people who are trying to hurt you. And you and I should not get revenge. But on the other hand, I have no intention of letting Alexander the coppersmith run all over me. Oh, he may gossip about me, he may do whatever, but I have no intention of allowing Alexander the coppersmith to run all over me. I have no intention of doing that. But Dave, you talked about grace. I sure did talk about grace. And one of the most gracious things is I'm not going to repay him. I'm not going to do the revenge. I'm not going to spend a moment about the revenge. I'm not even thinking about the revenge. I've turned it over to God, and God's the one who's going to deal with it. But I'm not going to allow him to control me, even though I've forgiven him, even though I've moved on. I'm not going to allow that. So, like I said, this lady said, well, he tells me I haven't forgiven him because I won't let my girl stay with him. You have forgiven him, but you should not let your girl stay with him. And of course, that made her feel great that she was making a right decision. So you don't have the exact same circumstance, but you have circumstances in your life where you have forgiven people. You have forgiven people like Alexander the coppersmith, people who've been trying to hurt you. And you have forgiven them. but you're not going to let them yank your chain the rest of your life. And they'll say, well, you haven't forgiven, or you're this or that, and you're a horrible person. How can God be pleased with you? Don't fall for that nonsense. That sounds how Satan talked to Christ in the temptation. Jump. Here Satan determined all the dictates. He dictated all the terms, and Jesus said, no, I'm not going down that road. You're not dictating my terms. And that's my life. Many of the people who I have forgiven, every person I have forgiven, I am not in the position of allowing them to dictate my life. And I would encourage you to have the same view of that. The same view is move on, put it in God's hands, but please do not let people dictate. Now you say, how's this tie into roots? Because when your roots are involved with truth and grace and mercy and forgiveness, it's not a contradiction to be compassionate toward them, but still saying, I'm in charge of me. I'm compassionate towards you, but I am not going to answer evil for evil, and I'm not going to get involved in ways that are unseemly. I'm not going to do that. So I encourage that because I just know so many people, even though there are various circumstances, various situations, people get in that, and I would encourage you to have strong roots in the Lord. Strong roots in grace and in truth. Sincerity and truth. Strong roots in God's instructions, His laws, His commandments, His instructions. Strong roots that as you have a relationship with God, you're going to continue to have a relationship with God, and you're not going to hurt other people. Now, the next one, I talked about roots and wings. Let's spend a little bit of time talking about wings. For children, it's very, very important that you have your children to learn to have wings. Of course, it's the right time. I'm not going to turn to 1 Corinthians 13, verse 11. 1 Corinthians 13, verse 11. When I was a child, I spoke as a child, I acted like a child, but when I became an adult, I put away childish things. We all grow up. That's very simple. We all grow up. So as a child grows up, when they're 3 years old, 5 years old, 7 years old, 15 years old, 16 years old, 18 years old, 23 years old, you help them to grow up. Obviously, you deal with a 3-year-old differently than you deal with a 20-year-old. Obviously. But again, you still, as the parent, find a proper way to guide them and direct them. Look at Hebrews chapter 5. Hebrews 5, verses 8 and 14. We have to give our children wings to fly, to move out of the nest, to try new things, not to be totally dependent upon us. They have to learn to deal with life. They have to learn to deal with money, saving money, bank accounts, now online bank accounts. How are they going to learn about investing money? Now again, you still want to guide them and help them, and either you can be the one to help them, or you can sometimes have other people, maybe family members who are very knowledgeable, or friends who are very knowledgeable, who can guide them in how to be productive and how to be successful. That's what we try to do with wings. And see, friends, that's what I try to do with you. I hope you, and a lot of you do the same thing with me. You don't try to control me. You don't try to rub my nose in life. And I certainly don't try to do that with any of you. I give you wings. I give you room to operate. I try to give you the guidance to help you. I try to be there for you. But some religious systems try to control you. They control so many things. Again, this is just a very small point. This is very small. It's not so much that the point is bad. It just reminds me how long ago it's been. I talk to my friends in other churches of God that this point is not an evil thing. But the fact is, it's been this long ago. And I'll go up to them and say, hey, where are you going for the feast? They say, well, we're going to go to such and such site if we get accepted and get permission to go. And there's nothing wrong with churches can do that if they want to. It's just a shock to me. It's like, oh, yeah. Over 20 years ago, I had to get permission to what feast site to go to. I'm just saying that's a lifetime ago to get permission. Now, you say, yeah, you forgot about that. But some of our friends still deal with that. Some of our friends get permission about can they go visit other churches. Some people will call me up on the phone and say, can I have permission to come to your congregation? Well, yes, you don't have to ask. You can just come. But I understand. I forget where some of those systems are, Because we talk about wings, we're encouraging wings, we're encouraging people to do things. We're not trying to hold on to people and put a rubber stamp on people and try to manage their life. We try to teach, instead of trying to teach children like they're 3-year-olds, instead of trying to teach church members like they're 3-year-olds, we don't even treat them like they're 16-year-olds. We treat them like they're 40-year-olds, like they're adults who can make choices, can make decisions. And we try not to control people's lives. And brethren, that principle, I hope you understand, is what we're trying to do here. Look at Hebrews 5, verse 8. Though Christ were a son, he learned obedience by the things which he suffered. You have to give children wings to make mistakes. Obviously, you try to shield them and shape them away from the biggest mistakes of life. Yes, they can learn from any mistake they make, but you don't want them to have a life-changing, horrible mistake. But your children have to make mistakes. Verse 14. But give people solid food belongs to those who are full age, mature, that by reason of use have their senses exercised to discern good and evil. So you're helping your children learn how to discern right from wrong, good from evil. You're helping your children learn to discern a con man, a con woman, a trap. You're trying to help them with that for their own good. And you don't want them to be conned and lose all their college money because that would set them back for years. But you try to control them and help them in that they make wise choices. It's real simple, friends. That's the way obviously should be with churches of mature adults dealing with each other. But friends, there are a lot of religious systems who don't do that. They want to manage it. They want to control it. They want to give certain permission. They want to, it's sad. And again, you've been gone from it for so long that sometimes when it comes up, it's like, oh yeah, I kind of remember that. I have to be honest, brethren. I give you a lot of room. Like even this year for the commemoration of the Lord's symbols, suffering and death. Remember, I talked about some people keep a meal. Do you remember what I said to you? I said, if you want to keep a meal, you'll probably have to do it at home, alone, or a family. Or there's a chance you might find some brethren who do a meal that night. But generally, we churches of God, we don't do that as an organizational thing. That's giving you wings. Now, I then have to respond that if you choose to do that. Now, our attendance that night was similar. I think it was 2 people different. But what had happened if half of you had decided to keep it at home? I cannot be crying and whining and moping around like, where did everybody go? Well, Dave, you showed them the liberties they had. You showed them freedoms they had. You can't get mad at them if they choose to do the freedoms. I'm just telling you, I always have to remind myself too, but I encourage wings. So sometimes when I see people do something, and I think, well, my wife will remind me. She goes, well, she'll sometimes say it this way. She knows the difference, but she'll say it this way. She'll say, you have freed the people. And she knows the difference, and I remind her, I say, well, no, I haven't freed them. I've just helped them to realize the freedoms that Christ gave them. And she knows that's true. But she'll remind me, she goes, well, what do you expect? You freed the people. You don't control them. You haven't controlled them for 20 years. And she thinks that's a good thing, by the way. She's not complaining about that because she also knows I practice freedom with her. I don't try to control her. I try to be a loving husband. She tries to be a responsive wife. We work as a team. But I don't try to control you guys. And again, I think that's a good thing if you analyze then how are you spreading your wings. Let's look at Galatians 5:13. Galatians 5:13. So again, if the teen study was about how the benefits of obeying God, I'm all for that kind of thing. That's our whole approach. What are the benefits of obedience? On the back of the handout, I have 3 reasons why we obey. And they're not the only 3. 3 reasons why we obey. The first one is to avoid consequences. The second one is to receive recompense later. And the third one is to glorify our Father. All 3 are valuable, but if we're only doing it for reason number 1, we're kind of immature yet. If we're just trying to save our neck, that's pretty immature. if we're trying to get a recompense or from the Lord later in the resurrection of the just, as Jesus said, nothing wrong with that, but it's not the complete maturity we want. We want to be doing the things we do to glorify our Father. This is why we do what we do. See, Galatians 3:13 says, man, oh man. 5, okay, that's it, 5:13. I was going to say, did I make another mistake I made a mistake in reading, not in writing it down. 5:13. For you, brethren, have been called to liberty. We have been called to liberty. Wings. Only do not use your liberty as an opportunity for the flesh. But we need to use our liberty to love and serve one another. So that's the reason why we do what we do. I know when I was taught this in one of my church visits, they were getting what I was saying, and they said, okay, so he said, you're not telling us we shouldn't obey. I said, oh, no, I'm not saying that at all. But you're wanting me to analyze my motive for why I obey. Bingo, that's exactly what I'm talking about. I'm asking you to analyze your motives, your reasons, why you do what you do, to make sure you're doing it as a mature child of God instead of an immature child of God. Are you avoiding robbing banks because you're afraid of getting caught? That's not very mature. Are you avoiding adultery because you're really afraid of how embarrassing it would be? That's not very mature. Now, I'm glad you're not robbing banks, and I'm glad you're not committing adultery. Those behaviors are good, but I think you really need, if you were in that situation, you would need to analyze, why are you obeying? Why are you doing what you're doing? And that's what I'm trying to do here. A couple of scriptures in Peter. 1 Peter 2:16. Similar thought here about liberty. 1 Peter 2:16. Again, the wings we want to have. We need to be as free, yet not using our liberty as a cloak for vice, but as servants of God. We use our liberty, our wings, to serve God, not to take advantage of other people, not to be esteeming ourselves highly. We use our liberty to serve others. 2 Peter 2, verses 19 and 20. Again, the concept of liberty, but notice this problem that we have to be careful of. We're going to go back to eating leavening. This is just a little humorous thing. I don't eat much pizza through the year. I love pizza, but I don't eat much pizza. But even my friend Sonny Rosenberger called me up and said, did you have your pizza yet? Because I've told Sonny before, I miss pizza during the days of unleavened bread. It's not like if I have it once or twice a year, that's all. But it's like, in my mind, I can't have it this week, so it plays on me. So Sonny jokingly said, hey, did you have your pizza yet? I said, no, not yet, but it's only Friday night and Saturday. I haven't had my pizza yet. But at some point, I'll eat some pizza. May or may not. At some point, I'll eat pizza again. But you understand what I'm saying? It's just the fact that in my mind, I shouldn't have it for the ritual I'm doing. So it's kind of like it's a greater temptation. It's like, okay, now it tastes really good in my mouth, even though I don't eat it that much. But 2 Peter chapter 2, verses 19 and 20. While they promise them liberty, they themselves are slaves of corruption. You say, well, I hear a lot of my friends go to churches that promise liberty. Probably no doubt those are easy words to say. But are the people who promise liberty, are they actually encouraging liberty? Are they actually engendering liberty? Are they actually multiplying liberty? Or is there still a trap for corruption that they themselves think they're getting free from it, but they're still not? But in life itself, people will promise you liberty, but what's really happening there? For by whom a person is overcome, also he is brought into bondage. If after you've escaped the pollutions of this world through the knowledge of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, if you become entangled again in them and overcome, the latter end is worse than the beginning. And then he even wrote saying, it would have been better for you to have not known the way of righteousness than having known it, to turn from the holy commandment delivered unto them. Again, so I ask you to consider that. We want liberty. We want to practice liberty with maturity, with wisdom, with sincerity, with truth. We want to learn from our mistakes. We want to learn to discern good from evil. We want to not use liberty for our personal lust, but we want to use liberty to serve the eternal God. If these things are valuable for our children, friends, they are just as valuable for us. Friends of mine here in the hall and friends of mine on the internet, please learn the lessons of roots and wings.